Hello, everybody. Dan Goldman, Congressman from New York here, and I'm really pleased to be joined by the legendary Bill Nye, known to me in my childhood as Bill Nye the Science Guy, who has been a staple on public broadcasting for decades, providing children with education on science and other things that so they can understand. And Bill, there is no question that you have touched the lives of probably hundreds of millions of people to this point. And I am speaking to you, and we are here together because today is a potentially really sad day. And it's one that hits me hard as the co-chair of the Public Broadcasting Caucus here in Congress, which is a bipartisan caucus. Republicans and Democrats have traditionally always supported public broadcasting. But a bill that was passed by the Senate last night and is coming over to the House today is a bill that would cut all funding, all federal funding, I should say, for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR, PBS, and emergency weather alerts, and a number of other things. And Bill, let's just start with your show, because people know it, and it's a central part of the educational curriculum that public broadcasting has provided. You and perhaps Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood are the iconic shows. But tell us a little bit about the reach and the access that your show has, and how that has benefited so many Americans, so many children around the country, including in areas where all they get is public broadcasting.
Well, public broadcasting provides programming and educational programming, especially for kids of all ages, all over the United States and Canada. It's one more, and a little bit of Mexico. It's one more way the United States not only provides just direct education. This is how the alphabet goes. This is how Arabic numbers work. And then in the case of my show, these are the fundamental ideas in science education. Along with that is we export our culture, our way of life, the idea that you engage everyone in education for the betterment of everyone. And I think people, you would know more about this than I do, but people who are opposed to funding national public radio and the public broadcasting system don't realize, have not taken into account the reach of public broadcasting, especially in rural areas where it's over-the-air television that people of all ages generally can access. So it is not in anybody's best interest to cut this funding. In the case of my show, I am so fond of pointing out that the U.S. Constitution is now available in paperback. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, Congress is to promote the progress of science and useful arts. That's Congress's job. And there's no better bargain for doing that than the very modest funding provided to national public radio and public broadcasting. Well, I can go on about this. We
will, because
I don't think anybody disagrees. It's just some people are just afraid. They're just afraid of educating people, I guess.
No, well, you raise so many important points there. The public broadcasting stations reach 99% of the US population, which of course includes rural areas that don't have access to broadband, that don't have cable television, that don't have access to YouTube or Netflix or streaming, or so many of the different services that many people probably watching this can't really imagine. And it is important also to emphasize what the rationale here is that we hear from the Republicans who are pushing this forward, and especially Donald Trump. The theory goes that NPR, PBS, public broadcasting has become biased. And that's what they argue, that it is no longer independent journalism. It is biased against Donald Trump and Republicans. And this, to me at least, is just another example of Donald Trump, especially being unable to accept criticism, to actually address the facts and the evidence and the truth. And that instead of having that debate on in any way, shape, or form, he wants to eliminate the mediums that people can receive that information or get that information. And we see that in the way he has gone after the media in general and saying things that are critical of him or he doesn't like is fake news. He's going after law firms to try to stop them from enforcing laws against him. He's even going after courts and trying to undermine the power and authority of the courts to interpret the law. And it is essentially his inability to accept criticism that is leading to a $1.1 billion rescission, which is a clawback of funding that Congress has already appropriated for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. The thing nobody talks about, which is what you're talking about, is all of the other things that public broadcasting does. So even putting aside NPR and PBS and independent journalism, you're talking about childhood education, other educational programs, and they're not addressed by Donald Trump. There's certainly no allegation that you and teaching kids about science is somehow politically biased. It also doesn't talk about one of the most important aspects of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is emergency weather alerts. And our system, the public broadcasting system, both with NPR and through television, is what enables emergency weather alerts to go out. And Senator Murkowski from Alaska made this point yesterday that there was a 7.3 earthquake in just off of the coast of Alaska that was potentially going to present a tsunami. Everybody got emergency weather alerts about a possibility of a tsunami so that they could anticipate it, react to it, and get out of the way. Without this response system, they don't get that alerts, and people are going to die because of it. Again, this is not any part of the rationale why Republicans are pushing for this. And so I think it's really important. And what I want to highlight with you is not only the reach of these educational programs, but the importance of the alerts and the weather alerts and the system of emergency alerts generally that are going to go away if and when this bill is passed. And I know it's a little bit outside of your wheelhouse, focusing on education, but talk about, if you could, Bill, just from your experience, all of the other benefits to society, to the United States that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting provides that would be eliminated by this bill.
Well, if I understand your question, the thing is, it's a shared experience. Public broadcasting is available to everyone, and everyone shares the programming. It's a touch point. There's virtually no one in the United States that hasn't heard of Sesame Street, hasn't watched Sesame Street, doesn't know who Kermit the Frog is. There's virtually no one. It's very, of course, more about. There's very few people that don't know the Science Guy show. And so this is because of public broadcasting. there are a lot of
Free public broadcasting.
free, yeah,
Importantly.
free. There,
Yeah.
no, I was going to say there's no commercials. This is a huge idea that instead of having uh, broadcasting funded by, in the case of children's television, when we did the Science Guy show back in the 20th century, there was big concern that children's programming was largely funded by toy companies. And I grew up with toys, I love toys, but there are potential difficulties with having toy companies promote their toys on television shows that feature the superheroes on whom the toys are based. And so this would be to get into this thing of common sense. And so public broadcasting doesn't have that, doesn't have those commercials. And this is true of children's educational programming and everything, all of the programming. And so this was the idea almost a century ago. This is the idea of public broadcasting. And then when it comes to weather alerts, you cannot beat radio and television. They are still an outstanding, ideal way to give, in the example that you're citing, emergency alerts. Not everybody has a mobile phone that's on. Not everybody has access to those networks, but everybody has access to television and radio. And so there have been many studies done about this. Many studies have been done about how many people are affected, how effective these alerts are, and how effective this programming is. That, I think, be very difficult for the people who want to curtail funding, very difficult for people to make a strong argument because the facts are very strong the other way, our way, your way. And
Yeah,
so
look, in rural states, Bill, you make the point. Alaska, we mentioned, with Senator Murkowski, Minnesota, North Dakota, all Texas. I mean, there's so many different states where public radio is often the only news source
yeah,
for people to get.
and
As
and
local news is sort of becoming consolidated by syndicates, the public radio, public television is the only way that anybody gets some degree of actual, factually based, truthful, independent media.
well, not just that, it's local. Many of the public broadcasting stations are local. And so the information that comes across is about what's going on in your community, your neighborhood. And this, once again, is the facts are overwhelming. So the other side is going after this for some other reason. I think it's just this perception that if people are educated, they're troublesome or something along that line.
Well,
What,
you know, yeah, it's interesting you say that, right? Because we hear these arguments of bias and political bias, but at the heart of it, it's just simply that there are some people who are afraid of education, who are afraid of people actually learning the truth, learning the facts. And in reality, in our day and age now, where you have very politicized media outlets, you might get the far right wing, you might get far left wing. There are people who have, I mean, there are quote unquote media outlets that have a real political bent. NPR, PBS is really on an island in many respects as the true only independent journalism. And what this comes down to me is just that there are people, perhaps one person who works out of the Oval Office, who um, cannot handle criticism, cannot handle opposition, cannot handle anyone who might be fact checking the things that he says. And therefore, he says that if people disagree with him, that they are biased. And that's clearly the motivation, and they're quite open about it, the folks who are pushing this. The other thing that's interesting to me, which I think many people don't understand, is that first of all, $1.1 billion in the federal budget is very little. This is not a big expense at all, but it is such an essential expense for this resource. But even this expense is actually beneficial to the economy because for every $1, there have been studies that say this in federal funding that goes to the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and public media, those stations generate $7 in local funding because of the ability to promote local businesses, local activity, and to be able to publicize, as you say, local news and local activities.
Local
So,
events, so-called.
say that
So
again.
local events in your community,
Right.
things that are going on in your community. So I'll just ask you, is there a way this afternoon when you guys go up there to argue about this, is there a way to ask the other side what facts that you can present that they disagree with? What is it? What fact about Sesame Street, science education, uh, education about geography, the alphabet? What facts did they challenge? And then the other question I just have asked this many times lately is what is it that what is it they're afraid of? What do they think is going to happen if National Public Radio is continued to be funded?
Well, the first question you ask is very simple. And the answer, I think, is very simple. They do not ever cite the educational programming of public broadcasting. They do not only do they not criticize it, they just don't address it. They ignore it. And that's part of the problem is that all they are talking about is reporting on NPR, on PBS, that is often really, really top-notch journalism.
Well, that's the old thing. Yeah.
So that it gets into the weeds, it gets into the details, and it exposes what's true and what's false. And in the age of Donald Trump, so much of what he says is false. And what happens is that he and his supporters here in Congress think that anybody who says or exposes him to be lying or making misrepresentations must be biased, not must be truthful. So the answer to your question is they don't talk about the educational programming. There's nothing, no allegations of anything improper. They ignore it. They ignore the emergency weather alerts. That is just a collateral consequence of their effort to defund independent journalism. And so, that's what's very frustrating here there's even if you put aside the journalism, and I think you and I would agree that their arguments of bias are completely bogus, but even if you put aside that, they are really throwing the baby out with the bathwater by getting rid of this, by defunding this educational programming, by defunding these emergency safety weather alerts, and by defunding access to local programming, local events, local news. And there's no allegations that any of that is biased. That's not what they're talking about.
Hmm.
And so, what has been frustrating for those of us who are really dedicated to public broadcasting and on the caucus is that the collateral consequences of this childish retribution are really damaging to the American people, and the majority of whom live in Republican areas. So they are hurting their own constituents because the majority of rural areas in America are represented by Republicans, and the majority of unique benefits of public broadcasting goes to those rural areas. So unfortunately, I don't
Well,
have a good answer to your question, but let me ask you just
yeah.
to wrap up here. You emphasize, I think, the point here that is so damaging. But if you had a lineup of Republican members of Congress sitting in front of you right now, ready to vote on this, what would you say to them to persuade them that voting to defund public broadcasting is the wrong vote?
Well, I guess I'd start with their constituents. These are your people like these services and want these services. And they're not going to stop supporting the president. They're on board with virtually anything the president says, but they will sorely miss the services from National Public Radio and public broadcasting in their communities. And this will, not this weekend, but maybe next year at the midterms, this will catch up with you. If you defund these services, the people in your districts may very well notice this and associate you with this bad outcome. They're not going to stop their support of the president. They're much more likely to stop their support of you, Mr. or Ms. Member of Congress.
Yep. And it's just to put a closing little anecdote on that, which is so accurate. I introduced an amendment to the bill that would have eliminated the public broadcasting cuts. And we were in the Rules Committee, and the one of the senior Republicans who was presenting to the Rules Committee is from Alabama. And one of the members of the Rules Committee asked him, well, what do you think about Alabama public broadcasting? And he said, I think Alabama public broadcasting is fantastic. It's essential. It's terrific for my constituents. And the Democrat who was questioning him said, so why are you voting to get rid of it? And he said, well, I'd like to exempt Alabama from the cuts. And it just goes to show that they know what they're doing is bad. And unfortunately, their loyalty, as you point out, is more to President Trump than it is to their own constituents. And the people of Alabama and all around the country are going to suffer for it.
Well, but the Alabamans, the Alaskans, in the recent example, go, hey, our person is out there protecting us, to heck with the rest of the country. And
but they're not. I mean, he voted for the bill and it did not exempt Alabama.
So stuff goes wrong. Yeah. So I just say all the time, Congressman, that both of my parents were veterans of World War II. My dad was a prisoner of war for 4 years. My mother was one of the code girls. She did something to break at first the Nazi Enigma codes, then later the Japanese naval codes. And they had tremendous pride in the United States. I grew up with this patriotism. And that's why I did the Science Guy show originally. I was very concerned about the future of the United States and its ability to compete internationally and to continue to innovate. This was a long time ago. I still have those concerns. But in those days, with the threat of the Axis powers and stuff, everybody in the United States, everybody with the allies, was on board with solving this one enormous problem, this world war. And they did in 5 years. And so I just encourage members of Congress from both sides to keep in mind that we've got to work together. The United States has to remain like-minded in our promotion of education, in our funding of education. And, people like me love to cite the Constitution, but there's a lot to it. These guys in 1787 realized the value of science. In 1787, they were very well-educated people, and they realized the value of education. And National Public Radio, public broadcasting provides nearly free education to everybody in the United States. So it is not in anyone's best interest to defund these organizations. Thank you for having me on,
Well,
and
thank
go
you.
up there and knock them out.
Well, we will keep fighting for this after this bill, even if it does pass. And unfortunately, the Democrats don't have enough votes to stop it from passing. So we will need Republicans to vote against it in order for us to
So,
prevent defunding the
something you might be able to get together very easily in the modern world is uh, public broadcasting call letters, station call letters in every congressional district, and then challenge the other side. Do you know the role of KCET? Do you know the role of KCTS? Do you know what WETA does? Challenge them,
Mhm.
and then I believe you'll have no trouble in the next few hours getting those data together and asking the other side, what is it about this station in your district that is bugging you so much? And I think, as the old saying goes, it's hard to hate face to face. When people are confronted with the facts of public broadcasting's influence in their districts, you only need a couple people, right, to change
That's
his
right.
or her mind to turn this thing around, right? 3 people, 2 people. So
Well, Bill Nye, the science guy, thank you so much for chatting about what is such a critical issue and such an unfortunate situation that we are facing right now. I know you will keep fighting for public broadcasting. I will keep fighting for public broadcasting, and this fight is not over with this vote. Thanks.
thank you very much, Congressman.